Hello and welcome back to First Act, a podcast from Koshy's Business Builders. I'm Cess Busby.
And I'm Adam Bubb.
And First Act is the podcast where we draw back the curtain on the passions, the struggles and the backstories of Australia's most dynamic business owners.
We have loved bringing you these stories throughout 2022 and can't wait to bring you more in 2023. Now, if you love what you're hearing, give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to us. We deeply appreciate you lending your ears to us each week for these amazing stories. Now, today's guest is a market disruptor whose advice is, shall we say, essential for any entrepreneur.
Richard Turner is the author of the new book, The Essential Entrepreneur, which is based on his learnings from running not just one but 4 successful businesses. One of those is Zen Energy, the second largest electricity retailer in South Australia, and soon to become Australia's first clean energy utility. He's into his third billion-dollar startup, and his move between food distribution, labour hire and renewable energy. He's mentored hundreds of early-stage startup founders through their journey, and if you want to know more about anything to do with starting a business, reinvention or industry disruption, well, you've come to the right man. Welcome, Richard.
Hi, Cess, and hi, Adam. Yeah, great to be with you both today, so looking forward to a good chat.
So are we. We always start, any good chat starts with an icebreaker. We start with our first icebreaker. This is to really throw you, to put you on the spot. I promise you it's nothing controversial, nothing off-brand or anything. This is, I'm excited to hear your answer to this one, honestly. If you could name 3 brands, I've really hyped this one up. If you could name 3 brands you can't live without, any 3 brands, whether it's Nike, Facebook, Veuve Clicquot, Champagne, what would those 3 brands be? And
that was very specific, Adam. And then your 3 brands.
No, look, I'm not. I am wearing Nikes today. Yeah, I may have been on Facebook a bit earlier, and no, I have not had champagne yet.
Okay. Let me think about this. So, I guess I have to be able to communicate. So, my mobile phone, which I have an Apple, so I'll have to say Apple is probably my first one. Probably. Look, champagne's actually not a bad one.
Yes, official champagne with the capital C from
I think
France.
at the end of a long day or a good glass of wine. God, there's so many of them. I'm going to go for a company I've actually been mentoring recently, which is probably the closest Australian sparkling we have to French champagne. And I'll tell you what, my wife won't drink anything but French champagne, but when I gave her this, she said, wow, this is really good. It's a company called Deviation Road from the Adelaide Hills, which is a really good Australian sparkling. So there's a wine brand. What else? Well, you got me on this, guys.
I think the ice is broken. Okay, no, we can settle on 2 and maybe come back to us on that 3rd. Let's loop back with you.
I'm thinking of something progressive like an electric car. I know we all sort of gravitate to Tesla, but I'm looking forward to some of the other electric car companies, particularly the European car companies, coming out to Australia. I mean, actually, we're going to see a flood of electric cars in the next couple of years, so I'm excited about that in general. Even your Toyotas, your Hyundais, they're all coming out now, which will bring the price down dramatically.
So you're what we'd call a serial entrepreneur. Was that something that you were born with? Were you one of those kids with the big ideas, selling things in the schoolyard?
Look, I've always had lots of ideas. I guess it just comes. Well, I think it's a natural thing. I work with lots of entrepreneurs who come from different backgrounds. I did grow up in a business family, so I was used to that. But I see so many entrepreneurs come from difficult backgrounds that didn't do all the schooling. And quite often it's not those bound by the rules of education. It's just people who think differently. And I get asked the question all the time about entrepreneurs born or made, and I think it's a real combination. It's more of a personality trait. I think that people just have that unique ability to focus really intently on things and see things that other people just don't see. And we're in a rapidly changing economy, and those, the majority of the population don't like change and are scared of change. But entrepreneurs just seem to be able to see opportunities all over the place. And the faster things change, the more opportunities they are. So they are just unique people. And myself, I guess, I have always seen opportunities all over the place. I'm not sure why that is, but it's just, I guess, a personality trait.
Do you think that entrepreneurial mindset is essential then to a successful startup?
I think it plays a big part of it. I think that ability to be able to really focus on the concept at hand, being tenacious. Like I see a lot of, as I said, entrepreneurs coming from difficult backgrounds. A lot are often immigrants who just have the tenacity to want to change their life circumstances, and they find a way. With those that are fortunate enough to come from wealthier backgrounds or a business family, the mentors are inside the family, and quite often they get this mindset passed on to them, or they grow up in that environment. But others just have that tenacity to go and find the people that are going to support them and back them or give them pieces of advice or education. But they've got that inherent ability just to chase it down and find out. And that's what a lot of people don't have. So they're not scared of change. They just go there and chase it down and get their ideas validated and test the market, find people they want to sell the product to, do all that. They just inherently know how to refine their ideas, go and test them, ask lots of questions and listen. Listening is the most important thing that people often fail to do these days, when they're doing some research on a product, and that might be with family and friends, or it might be in the wider market they're testing an idea on. But just asking those open-ended questions, what do you think about this product? And people will say, I think it's great, but can it do this? Can it come in this color? Can it come in this size? I'd buy it if it was $10 cheaper. All those things that people often fail to do. They'll send out email surveys and things like that, but you just don't get that sort of quality of answer, which people need to be able to do these days.
We'll get a little bit further into a bit more about some of the learnings from your book, The Essential Entrepreneur, as we go along. But I just want to go back to that, how you mentioned, you grew up with your father as a bit of a mentor, right? As he ran a meat company. How much did that influence your dreams of wanting to start businesses yourself?
Yeah, it was interesting. So I was the youngest of three boys, and this is back in the I guess going into the business was probably in the 70s, but I was the first one to have the chance to go to university, and that was sort of in the early 80s. I did a Bachelor of Business, and I was one of the first cohorts actually to go through university and learn computer coding, just after it had come out of punch cards in schools.
Long before it was the cool thing to do.
Long before it was the cool thing to do. It was actually quite cool, but it's just, we just didn't have much of it back then. So having, being one of those first cohorts to go through and learn computer coding was really cool.
Yeah, I guess,
and doing it on a screen and on a keyboard, as you could imagine. And the meat company was a meat wholesaling, processing, distribution business. So it was quite a large business. But back then, it was only the accounts that was computerized. And if you could imagine this, it was on an old Wang computer that had a 5.5-inch floppy disk. That was the extent of our accounts computer back then. We just purchased a big Hewlett-Packard 3000, like a mini mainframe, which back then had to go in its own big air-conditioned room. It had a CPU that was the size of a washing machine. We had hard drives that were 250 megabytes, which now would fit on your fingernail, and big line printers that clattered away, and the reel-to-reel tape drives. And coming out of university, it was quite. I was told this is my responsibility. I've got to come into this business, harness this massive computer, and start automating as much as I could, the major processes in the business. So I came into the business, sort of sat alongside the people that were putting the system in, learnt how to program in a 4G language back then. It was called Cognos Powerhouse. And so started working on different systems. And the one thing that was a big process for this company was we had cattle buyers going all around the country buying thousands of head of cattle, tens of thousands probably. And we had to capture all the live weights, the prices, where they came from, who bought them, what the breeds were, and the live yields and the processed yields, and understanding our true cost of product and all the insights that went with that. And we never got that in any sort of timely manner because it took literally weeks to process that information manually. So one of the first programs I set up was this livestock management system. And suddenly we were able to capture all that information, key it in live as it was happening, and gain all those insights. And for a young kid like me, I mean, I was literally 21, 22 doing this, and seeing suddenly the information and the insights that we got from that data and how we were able to react to the market and change the way that business operated was really my first insight to disrupting an industry. It gave that business a massive advantage, and the company grew. It turned public. The export division was a company called TNR Pastoral, and that just continued to grow. New owners came in and took over that, new leadership, but it's now a multi-billion-dollar business in Australia. It's now called Thomas Foods, remarkable company. In fact, it's the biggest private meat processing company in the country. But as a young kid growing up in all of that, and also working in a meatworks where, as you could imagine, the diversity of cultures of people working in a place like that was remarkable. So before I went to uni, I used to go in there on the school holidays, and Dad would make me wash the walls and clean the drains and pack the offal. Apologies to the vegetarians out there, but it's sort of pretty grounding stuff. And you learn the value of money pretty quick, and you learn the value of hard work pretty quick. And working with everyone and having to get on with everyone was such an incredible lesson when I was young. So combining all that with a bit of a taste of innovation and disruption, I guess, was probably how it started and how it set me up for the rest of my life.
So then how do you go from that? You've jumped into your dad's family business, you're working in there, you're automating, you're innovating, things are really streamlined. Then how do you go, actually, I want to give this a crack myself. I'm going to start my own business.
Well, when the company went public, which was 86, that was still a long time ago, my brothers and I had the choice, do we stay on with the public company, which was going to be pretty boring, or do we go and do our own thing? And so sticking with the food industry, we looked at what are the trends going on around the world, and we looked at the US, and we could see that there was suddenly an emergence of what we would call total food service company. So this business was a company that sold wholesale supplies of product into cafes and restaurants and takeaways and things. So my first company with my brother was called Regency Food Services. And in Australia at the time, if you had a restaurant or a takeaway, you really had supplies for almost everything. Because it was all multi-temperature zone, you had frozen food supplies, you had grocery supplies, you had dairy supplies, you had chilled goods suppliers, you had supplies for everything, packaging. So we thought, well, let's try and be the first ones, or one of the first ones in Australia, definitely the first ones in South Australia, to start to put this total food service business together, which was a big task because you had to have multiple temperature zone warehousing. You had to have delivery vehicles that could do this as well. So it was a real challenge to get going. So we thought, well, we can't do this for thousands of products. So let's start with a simple market, which was takeaways, and to supply a general chicken shop or a fish shop with its takeaway products, you could do it with 30 or 40 odd lines. You had a few frozen seafood lines and snack food lines and cooking oils and groceries and things. So we put all this together and started out with the takeaway market being our main market. And the business just took off really quickly and grew really quickly. And we were able to self-fund it at that point. And then we got to the restaurants and cafes where we're dealing primarily with chefs. And we had to look at what's our competitive advantage that we could develop for that market. And I remember sitting down with my brother one day saying, look, we're working the hours that every other distribution company works. We're working from early in the morning, 4 or 5 in the morning, loading trucks. And, we finished our job and we're going home, early afternoon. That's just the way the industry worked. And I said to my brother, the market we're servicing is hospitality, and they work almost opposite hours of the clock to we work. And the people that are placing the orders are the chefs. And chefs are grumpy people at the best of times. And they'll, at the end of their shift at sort of 10 o'clock at night, they'll say, you know what I want, and slam the phone down. And of course, you get the orders wrong, and we'd have to send out expensive couriers the next day to fix orders up. And it's always our fault. It's never the customer's fault. So we thought, how can we now work the same hours as our customers work? So we thought about this, and we actually ended up setting up the first 24-hour food distribution warehouse in the country, which was a huge step. We had to do a whole enterprise bargaining agreement with our staff to enable them to work 24 hours. We ran 3 telesales shifts from about 8 in the morning through till 10 at night, so we could talk to the chefs when they finished their trade. We could build a relationship with them. We could confirm their orders. And then when we shut the orders off at 10 o'clock, we spent the next 2 hours, and we were still sort of on the leading edge of technology with our computer systems, and we developed quite an amazing system where we could run picking sheets for all our stock in the warehouse per truck, per bin location. So we could do one lap of the warehouse with our storeman for every truck that we loaded, and we had about 15 big multi-temperature zone trucks. So we picked all this stock, we staged it in the staging area, we called it. We had telescopic loaders that went into the trucks and loaded the trucks. So we had a very automated, very rapid picking and loading system. So it ended up, we were the last to take orders. We had the relationship with the chefs. We got the orders right because we were confirming the orders with them. We were picking the stock overnight. We were the first to have the trucks loaded and on the road in the morning. And as you can imagine, the customers just swirled, and the company took off again. And I remember getting the call from the CEO at Qantas Flight Catering. I think it was January 1996, I reckon, and saying, "Richard, we're going to give you the food business for Qantas." And it was just amazing.
Getting a call like that, building a business in that time. We're talking from 1987 to 1996, and then having the national airline kind of going, we want you. That's an amazing achievement.
Yeah, it was incredible. And we were still quite young. And to have that sort of response from, again, disrupting the market. And we did some other things with that company too, about the same time, about 1996. We were in a very similar situation we are now. There was a very big shortage of hospitality staff. There was a cafe explosion going on at the time. And we thought, and a lot of sales staff were coming off the road saying, the manager of this place wants me to try and talk to the chef at this other place down the road and try and pinch him to work for me. And our sales staff were being used as, recruitment staff half the time to try and pinch staff from other restaurants and other places to go and work for them. And it's strange that I sat back and thought about this, and thought, I wonder if there's an opportunity here for a hospitality staffing agency. And we actually had a young girl helping us recruit our own staff, and she had a background in hospitality. And Christy was the name. And I said to Christy, "What do you think of this idea? Do you think there's an opportunity here? And if there is, would you be interested in running this business for us?" So she took a day or two to think about it and came back to me and said, "Richard, I think you're right. Absolutely, there's a need for this and would love to give it a go." So we set up a company called Regency Staffing as like an affiliate business to the food business. And very quickly, we had about 300 chefs working for us within a couple of years. And we had 10 chefs in a Qantas. We had chefs in all the big hotels around the place. And we did this initially as a service for our customers, thinking we'll create a flexible workforce that will really help our customers out, that will make them love us and they'll buy their food from us. What we didn't actually realise when we started it, of course, the people who order the food are the chefs. So if you own the chefs, you really own the food supply. So it became this sort of circular economy, and it was amazing. So that the business just took off and grew again through another quite radical innovation. And this is where, with innovation and disruption, it's a matter of finding these things as a smaller, newer business that established people just can't compete with. They just can't change the way they do business, these larger entities, and you're really leveraging their their company size against them. So, there's a lesson in there for smaller companies starting up. Find that unique thing that you can change the way the market operates to really create that advantage.
Yeah, you're in control of that. Like you said, you're talking about mindset and entrepreneur mindset. It's being open to those opportunities when they kind of come to you. I think what's so interesting is that you've founded a number of companies, as we've said, 4 companies there, and then you've also you've sold companies, and then you've stepped out from Regency Staffing. You step away as a founder. How do you know your job's done with with a company and it's time to move on to the next one? Because I know with Regency Foods, it's now owned by Bid Food. It's a multi-billion-dollar company. Not every business owner has that kind of strike rate. What makes it? How do you get to a level of success and go right next venture?
It was interesting. You work through all these different ideas you've got for improving the business and creating a unique advantage. And I guess the time's up when someone approaches you like Bid Food, because they were a South African company. They still are, but went to the UK. They rationalised the market in the UK, bought the biggest distributors over there, and they had a model for expanding internationally. And then they came to Australia, and they saw our company, and they said, "That's the model. That's the model we want to have for Australia." We just won the Australian Food Service Distributor of the Year 2 years in a row. They said, "We want that company," and they made no secret of it. They said, "We want to buy your company," and we said no about the first 4 times. They came back to us, about 5 times within a year, just upping the price. And I guess it gets to a certain point where you think, "Yep, I think we've done as much as we can do here," and we stepped back, and that was it. But I think it's a combination of someone coming to the table with the right offer, and you think, how much more can we do with this business? And because at some point it needs to go into bigger hands with deeper pockets, and someone else can really take it on its entire journey, which it is now. In fact, the young girl I employed as my receptionist when she was 20 is now the CEO of that multi-billion-dollar business, which is remarkable. And she's a gun. But there's a lesson there in employing people. Don't just employ people for a job. You want to employ people that can become part of your leadership team and develop within the business, no matter how old they are or what they're doing. And she's a prime example of that. But another thing with businesses that you always need to ask yourself, and I think this has probably helped set us up again for the Bidvest or Bid Food takeover, was what business am I in? And because quite often businesses, particularly a business like that, actually has 3 or 4 different businesses inside of it. But usually there's only one business where you actually add the most value. And you've got to understand where your core skills are and what you do really well, and what are parts of the company that are just a distraction and don't make money or cause headaches or whatever. And for us, we knew we were good at purchasing product. We knew we were good at running a logistically advanced warehouse, and we knew we were good at marketing and sales. But one thing that always gave us a big headache was running a fleet of very expensive trucks, because drivers usually, when they're employee drivers, there's a sort of physical limit that they're prepared to work at. Trucks would break down, drivers would be sick, they had to be cleaned and maintained. For us, it was just such a distraction to what we knew we were really good at, what we enjoyed doing, and where we actually made the money. So we went to our drivers one day and said, "Look, who would be interested in owning their own vehicle? And what if we paid you a percentage of the value of stock you took out?" And we worked out with them that to maintain their current salary, and I'm sort of going back thinking now what the history was, I think it was about 4.75% or something like that. We worked out if we paid them that, they would earn the same money they're on now, plus enough money additionally to pay for their maintenance of their truck, their cleaning, their having a spare driver. All the additional on costs were covered certainly within that percentage. But they knew in the back of their heads that they could do more, and you only got to get 1 or 2 to take it on, and then suddenly everyone sees the opportunity and goes for it. And when we did this, it was fascinating because they could only do about 25 or 30 deliveries a day, as employees. But suddenly, overnight, these guys became supermen, and they were suddenly doing 50 or 60 deliveries a day. They were earning double the money they earned before. Our customers became their customers. They were going into the freezers, rotating the stock, upselling the customers on everything. And it was remarkable. And by buying the trucks back off of us, each of those trucks were worth 150 grand. So, we got probably $1.5 million back into the business as capital. So we could put it into the things that we knew we do really well that added value to the business. And they were happy as Larry because they were making a fortune and doing a great job. So, just one of those things that you always have to ask yourself, what business am I in and what could be better done by someone else? And keep the focus on where you add the most value is a really important point for people to take home.
Oh, so many valuable insights in that just then, Richard. Look, we'll be back with you in just a moment. Your exceptional brain has so much more to tell us, I'm sure. We just need to take a short break. We're back with Richard Turner to chat with him about his founder journey. And what I'd like to dive into next is Zen Energy. With Zen Energy, you were one of the pioneers of the clean energy movement. So what challenges did you face in disrupting such a traditional sector?
Yeah, changing a traditional sector like the energy sector was an enormous task initially. Timing is everything. And with that, back in 2004 when we started, and imagine the landscape, there was no solar companies or very, very few. They were quite sort of very early adapter type companies, more hobby companies back then, if whatever existed, but there was no mainstream commercial solar businesses. But it was at a time when John Howard, who was Prime Minister at the time, was just talking about, or you were reading in the papers, stories about climate change being a thing. And John Howard was just starting to talk about subsidies for reducing carbon in the home. So there was things happening. There was triggers out there in the market that were starting to indicate there was an opportunity. But at the same time, my kids were playing in the cubby house at the back of the yard, and they wanted to put a little radio and a TV set out there, and there was no power at the back of the yard, and I said, okay, well, let's just jump in the back of the car, we'll go down to the hobby shop and we'll see what we can find, thinking I was going to come home with some sort of battery. And we got into the shop and we were looking around at things, and we found a little solar panel, tiny little solar panel, an inverter and battery and regulators, and we put together this little 12-volt system for the cubby house and stood back, and I thought, oh my God, this all works, and the kids were having a great time, and sort of put my business hat on and thinking about the house. And my father-in-law was a senior electrician, and I said to Peter, I can't see any technical barriers towards this technology actually running a house. And he said, no, there's none really. You just got to find someone to make the componentry, and regulations have got to allow for it to connect to the grid. And anyway, I started doing my research and found a company in Germany called SMA that just started making these small solar inverters for the home. And then also found a company in China that called ET Solar that's now, I think, the fourth largest manufacturer of solar panels in the world. But back then, just had one small hand production line. And so we sat down and we had this conversation about working with the Germans and trying to integrate all these components and build, because no one understood how solar worked back then. It was really in the realms of weird science. How do you make energy from the sun? So I thought, well, the only way to get over that in presenting it to the market was to put it into a system. So we coined the phrase home energy, and we called the company Zen, which was a great brand back then. So Zen was, Ross Garnaut, now our chairman, calls it zero emissions now. Back then, it was Zen was an acronym for zero energy. It was about balancing generation and demand. But what people fell in love with was the Eastern connotation. This is wisdom, enlightenment, and a new way of life, which perfect branding for a renewable energy brand. But people just fell in love with the idea of energy independence and didn't understand how the energy was made from the sun, but they just understood that it happened, and they didn't have to worry about understanding the componentry. We packaged it all up into the Zen home energy system. Everything was branded Zen, and we launched the company, and it just took off like a rocket. And we were the fourth fastest growing company in the country at one stage. We were certainly the fastest growing company in South Australia 2 years in a row. We won the Australian Entrepreneur of the Year in 2010. But after we'd installed about 30 or 40,000 systems, we thought, well, these systems we're installing have a 20 to 25 year system life. So we thought, well, we can't keep installing these forever. So, and it was also important that we actually created a link between the energy coming from the grid and these solar and battery systems that were sort of behind the meter. So transitioning to become an energy retailer was a really important step for us, but that was certainly beyond my skills. I sort of understood the solar and the battery thing and being able to get that business going and the branding, and we positioned it well. But I certainly didn't understand the complexities of the energy markets and the regulations that controlled energy in the grid. And then in 2015, so Professor Ross Garnaut did the 2008 and 2011 Garnaut review for the federal government, where the federal government commissioned him to do this review to say, what is the impact of climate change going to have on our economy longer term? And then not long after that, he also, for the federal government, initiated the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, the Renewable Energy Agency, ARENA. He designed the first carbon pricing mechanism. A remarkable man. But Ross didn't just want to be the architect of the change. He really wanted to be part of the change, and he was looking for a company that he could join. And he was introduced to Zen, and he said, wow, you've got the people, you've got the technology. Can I go on this journey with you? And we said, yes, of course, Ross. We actually need you because we've developed this technology along with big solar farms and big wind farms, but the big batteries, we need to get this stuff happening and connected to the main grid to enable the energy system to transition to renewables. So Ross joined us in 2015, and we're now on that journey. And this is where you have to ask yourself as founders, do I have all the skills to go on the journey I'm going on? Because with Regency Foods, my brothers and I had that knowledge. We came from a food background, and we could see where we wanted to go and how we wanted to develop it. But with this energy company, I coming from a cubby house startup to, get part of the way with my own skills, but then realizing I had to have all these other technologies and economic understanding of what was going on in the market. That were skills I didn't have. So I had to find those people, or they found us through, I guess, good media and good success that we'd had, and came on the journey with us. And now Zen's on that journey of being the company's first clean energy utility, and already in South Australia, the second largest generator and retailer to AGL, and most of AGL senior staff now work for Zen, and around the country, the company will soon be the second largest generator nationally or retailer nationally.
It's an amazing story. And one of those things I think you capture in The Essential Entrepreneur is that idea of how do you sort out from what is a great idea, and how do you really stress test that and figure out that it's got legs and it's got something to offer the world? How do you make sure that your good intentions are going to make good business sense as far as matching up idea and commercial?
Yeah, and that comes right back to the very beginnings of any business, where you've got to validate that market and you've really got to test it hard. And as I said earlier on, you've really got to go out to potential customers and ask the difficult questions, and validate the business model to make sure, because you've got to have a customer that's willing to pay the price for your product or service. And in my role as the entrepreneur in residence at the University of South Australia, and also working with the Entrepreneurs Organisation, I've mentored hundreds of companies and seen hundreds of companies sort of go through the startup stage and the scaling stage. And it's not a straightforward journey. You've got to validate your market. And the whole process of starting a business too is a very different process to growing a business. So starting a business is the ideation and the creation stage, and testing and validating the market, maybe piloting some ideas, getting the product market fit, making sure there is a customer. But then you've got to really sit down and do the business plan. And I remember spending hours and hours and hours with my accountant just going over and over the numbers. How much of this product do I have to sell to make a profit? What is my true cost of goods? And if you're importing product, you've got to think of things like import duties and taxes and logistics costs, and costs of containers are going through the roof. So you've got to make sure you know what your landed cost is. But how much of this product do I have to sell to make a margin? What products and services am I selling? That's another question. What markets and customers particularly am I selling to? What infrastructure do I need? So when I say infrastructure, what technology do I need? Accounts packages, any specific software that I need? What people do I need? Is it just me to start with, or is it a couple of other people with different skills or business partners? What physical infrastructure do I need? Do I need an office? Do I need a warehouse? Do I need trucks? What physical assets do I need? And then how am I going to finance it? So am I going to finance it from my own savings? Family and friends are going to help me. Sometimes you're lucky and you've got family and friends that want to see you have a go in a sort of lower risk environment. Or do I need an angel investor, or go to the bank if I've got some assets to finance against? The banks don't like taking risks on a startup business, so they'll want to know what assets you've got that can go with security. So it's hard work, and the timing's got to be right. You've got to ask yourself questions about, what is it that I'm selling? Is it a product or is it a service? Because they're very different companies or businesses. If you're just selling yourself as a service or an extension of yourself, you only make money when you're actually working, which is always a challenge. And it's very difficult to scale those companies. And venture capital firms are very hesitant to invest in service companies. So if there's a way of productizing your service, turning it into something, or having a platform as an extension of your service that enables you to sell day and night all over the world, as opposed to just providing a service in your local market, it becomes a very different company then. And thinking big is an interesting concept, because what I work with a lot of companies on is actually, because you get so busy day to day and you can't see the wood from the trees, and you just sit there and you're stuck in this rut and the business just doesn't go anywhere. Imagining the business in 5 years' time at 10 times the size is a really interesting exercise, and I encourage everyone to do that. So sit down, and when I put it to people, think of the business being 10 times the size. They go, oh, it will never be that. I can't imagine that. And I say, well, sit down and try and imagine it. And it's a real mind-expanding experience. But you sit down and you imagine what it looks like in, say, 5 years' time. What, as I said, when you're starting a company, what revenues are going to be. So 10 times the revenue, start with that. What margin you're going to have, what profit you're going to have, and then work through that whole profit and loss statement, of here's the revenue, this is the expenses, this is how much I'm making, this is the products and services I'm selling at that point, this is the markets and customers I'm selling to, this is the infrastructure I'm going to have, this is the people I'm going to have. Do the organization chart, understand what that company looks like, and have it in your head what it's going to look like in 5 years' time. But then if you work back year by year to where you are now, and what changes have to happen each of those years to be able to get to that 5-year plan, suddenly it all starts to appear in front of you, and you think, oh, okay, I can get there, and this is what I need to do. And then you focus on what must happen next year, because that's where you have the most clarity. That's right in front of you. And then, the next few years out might be a bit fuzzier, but and every business plan is a living thing. It always changes. There's nothing fixed in stone. So you just change it as you go. But having that vision of where you want to go, and vision is such a critical thing for companies to have right. You've got to have that vision statement so that not only it reflects you and your passion and the why you get out of bed in the morning and why you do what you do. You've got to have that passion, because that is what excites everyone around you. So, and it's not just for your people, it's for your customers, It's for all your stakeholders. Your suppliers need to understand the passion and the vision and what you want to achieve, what's the long-term objective. Because if you're not going to get the best price from your suppliers or the support from your suppliers if they don't know what you're doing and why you're doing it. And your financiers, your bankers, you're being able to present, and you'll find yourself presenting all the time when you're in business to everyone, not just your customers. And your people are the most important asset. And I go back to my Zen Energy business. People loved being part of the transition of the energy sector to clean energy. People just loved that idea and wanted to be part of that journey, and people came to us. And if you can be passionate about it, reflect that in your vision, people will come to you like bees to a honeypot. It's just, but so many companies just don't have a vision. Don't know, how can you create a culture and a passion if there's just no vision? So
yeah, you're absolutely right. You need to be very clear on your purpose and your why, and to be able to take people with you. Richard, unfortunately, that's all we've got time for today. So the essential...
I think it was a really broad conversation. I probably spoke too much, but anyway, we covered a lot of ground.
We did cover a lot of ground. Now, if you want to find out more about entrepreneurship, well, a great place to start is Richard's book, The Essential Entrepreneur. It's available online at essentialentrepreneur.com, Booktopia, and all good bookstores. So thanks again for joining us today, Richard.
Oh, thanks, Sis, and thanks, Adam. It was a great conversation.
Yeah, Richard, look, we could keep on talking all day, but, we've all got businesses to start. I've got billion-dollar companies to begin and start my 5-year plan right now after talking to you. Thank you for inspiring us. It's been fantastic. So thank you. Thank you to our listeners as well for joining us today and every week, each week for First Act. This year. We can't wait to bring you more conversations just like this in 2023. Have a great new year.
Bye.